The gate had barely hit the dirt before I realized my quiet life in rural America was about to get blown apart by a woman who believed the universe owed her everything. And maybe it was the way she swung that crowbar like she was auditioning for a reality show, or maybe it was the deranged confidence on her face. But in that instant I knew. This was not going to end with an apology casserole. They say moving to the countryside gives you peace. They never warn you about the neighbors who think your property lines are suggestions. I had bought the land fair and square in 2026, a stretch of open pasture and golden dust on the western edge of Montana, where the sky felt bigger and the future felt cleaner. It was supposed to be my reset button. My reclamation of sanity after a decade orbiting corporate burnout in Chicago. But peace doesn't stand a chance when someone like HOA Karen decides that your land is actually hers. Your gate is apparently her gate, and the road that legally runs to your property has somehow been an affront to her lineage since the dawn of time. The first time I met her, she introduced herself not with hello, but with a question that should have been my red flag. Did anyone tell you that your driveway is in the wrong place? I remember blinking at her, unsure if she was joking. My driveway, I said slowly, glancing at the gravel path that had been there for 40 years. The one on my land. She folded her arms, chin raised like a seesaw stuck upward. Yes, that one. You'll need to move it so it stops bringing random outsiders through our neighborhood. Our neighborhood. I lived a solid mile down that road, the only residence between Highway 72 and my pasture. Her home was in the adjacent development that split off from the county road, a place stuffed with tidy white fences and people who filed complaints for sport. I had chuckled politely then, brushing it off as eccentricity. I thought she'd get over it. But people like HOA Karen do not get over things. They escalate. The second encounter came a week later when I caught her planting private road signs along the path to my farm on my property from a box she'd bought at a hardware store. The signs weren't even straight. Their crooked metal stakes stabbed the ground like badly placed accusations. I asked her what exactly she thought she was doing. Protecting the community, she said. By trespassing? I have rights, she snapped. Like rights were coupons you clipped from the newspaper and redeemed at unsuspecting neighbors' expense. The sheriff made her remove the signs. She glared at me the entire time, muttering about respect and accountability words she wielded like weapons but never applied to herself. I should have known, even then, that she'd come back bolder. But I didn't expect this. Not the morning I walked out of my barn to find her mid-swing, crowbar arcing like spite in motion, as she ripped my newly installed gate off its hinges. There are moments in life where your brain tries to reboot from shock. You stare, frozen, thinking, is this actually happening? Is this real? Did a grown adult really just vandalize my property while wearing yoga pants and a jacket that says Women Against Tyranny? Karen, I shouted because yes, she insisted people call her Karen with pride, like it was a banner of righteousness. What the hell do you think you're doing? She turned, crowbar still raised, chest heaving. You can't block public access. This land is historically communal. Historically communal? The land records went back to 1894, and not a single scrap of paper mentioned communal anything. It was private land since before her grandmother was born. What are you talking about? I demanded. You're trespassing. And that gate is on my property. Her smile tightened. You won't get away with this. My HOA knows. The committee knows. The entire neighborhood knows you've been destabilizing our community. There it was again. Her favorite imaginary army. The HOA was not her army, though she treated it like one. The neighborhood was not a government, though she acted like a self-appointed sheriff of morality and property lines. But in her mind, she was the guardian of a moral order only she understood. The sheriff arrived 27 minutes later, long enough for her to create an entire soliloquy about heritage and communal pasture rights dating back, according to her, at least a few decades, if not centuries. The sheriff listened, took notes, and then calmly said, "Ma'am, this is his gate. On his land. You can't destroy what isn't yours." She gasped like he'd personally betrayed the Constitution. It's not his. He's trying to force his way through our neighborhood. It's unsafe. It's disruptive. I'm filing a complaint. No, I'm filing multiple complaints. She went on and on until the sheriff warned her that vandalism charges were on the table. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. Something resolute. Cold. Unmovable. If she wanted a war over a gate, over a road, over a path that legally existed long before she did, then fine. I'd give her something to complain about. The idea came to me that night, sitting on my porch watching the sunset bleed over the fields. I thought about her arrogance, her entitlement, her need to control everything and everyone. And then I thought about county law, and easements, and public access infrastructure, and the little-used, dusty statute that a friend of many an urban planner had once told me about over beers. A landowner with a county-maintained easement could petition to redirect the public access route so long as they paid for the new path and ensured the new road connected to an existing public road. I didn't have to move my driveway. I could move the road, not onto my land, onto theirs. Legally, it took 3 months of paperwork, 2 property surveys, for meetings with the county commissioners who mostly stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language until I showed them the section of the code she had probably never imagined anyone would read. And a fee, a large one, but I had saved for years to buy peace. And if peace meant turning her cult of suburban entitlement upside down, then so be it. When the approval came, stamped and signed, I almost laughed. Not out of spite, out of sheer poetic justice. The new road would bypass the old narrow path entirely. It would connect to the main public street, and it would run directly through the greenbelt area that bordered their neighborhood, the one place they always insisted children played, even though I had never seen a single kid within 100 yards of it. Construction began in April, and if the bulldozer surprised them, the published county notice surprised them more. The HOA held emergency meetings. Karen circulated flyers with dramatic headlines like "Stop the road that threatens our community," and "This is an attack on our freedom," and my personal favorite, "Our neighborhood is under siege." She claimed the road would bring crime, pollution, strangers, instability, broken marriages, bad energy, and possibly feral cats. She shouted at construction crews. She tried to block machinery with her Subaru. She got escorted away 3 times. When the road was completed, smooth asphalt curving neatly around the slope toward my farm and right past the edge of her neighborhood, something in her seemed to rupture. She stared at it like the pavement itself had insulted her ancestors. She stormed to my property line one afternoon while I was checking the fence posts. "This is harassment," she screamed. "This is legal," I replied calmly. "You think you've won?" "No," I said. "I think you finally understand you can't control everything." Her face twisted. "You're a menace." "And you," I said, "broke my gate." That single sentence, simple, calm, undeniable, cracked her composure more than any legal document ever could. But the real twist came later. 2 weeks after the road opened, her own HOA filed a grievance against her. It turned out the new road required the neighborhood to update signage, adjust boundaries, and comply with county roadway regulations. All minor things. But the HOA blamed her for the chaos, for the fees, for the attention, for the embarrassment. She had spent so long demanding control that she never realized how exposed her actions would become once the spotlight turned. And the spotlight did turn. Every neighbor began talking about her. Every past conflict resurfaced. Every petty tantrum became part of a growing record of complaint. The very committee she claimed as her loyal army quietly pushed for her removal. And they succeeded. It was one of the rare moments in life where karma wasn't just poetic, it was cinematic. She cornered me one final time, trembling with indignation, eyes bright with fury. "You ruined my reputation," she hissed. "No," I said gently. "You built it. I just stopped letting you build it on my property." Her silence was the most peaceful moment I'd had since moving there. And that was when the real healing began. The aftermath of her defeat didn't arrive as a dramatic collapse. It came quietly, creeping across the neighborhood like a late frost that killed whatever pride was left standing. In the weeks that followed her removal from the HOA committee, I noticed fewer cars parked outside her house. The gatherings that used to spill onto her driveway, strategy meetings, complaint circles, whatever rituals fueled her righteousness evaporated. People who once hovered around her now avoided eye contact when they drove past. But silence doesn't mean surrender. Not for someone like her. About a month after the HOA ousted her, on a windy Saturday morning, I found a stack of envelopes stuffed into my mailbox. Each was written in the same pressed handwriting, blocky, self-important, as if the pen strokes were marching in angry formation. I opened one, then the next, then the next. Every letter was a threat disguised as a manifesto. You have damaged community harmony. You have manipulated the system. You have no regard for the well-being of others. You think you can hide behind the law, but the truth will catch up. I almost laughed at that last sentence. The law wasn't a shield, it was a structure. One she kept running into at full speed as though it were made of paper instead of reinforced legal precedent. I called the sheriff's office. They advised me to keep the letters and report if she escalated. They sounded tired at the mention of her name, like she had aged them years in mere months. The sheriff sighed on the phone. If she comes onto your property again, call us right away, he said. Understood. And try not to engage. People like her feed on reaction. I knew that. But I also knew something else. People like her don't just give up. They regroup. They adapt. They find new ways to assert control. Sure enough, 2 days later, she escalated, not with a crowbar this time, but with a performance. I was repairing a fence on the south side of the property when I heard shouting. Loud, dramatic, exaggerated shouting, like someone trying to make sure an audience was watching even if there wasn't one. I followed the noise until I saw her standing by the new road, waving her arms with theatrical fury while an unlucky cyclist slowed to avoid her. You're destroying our peace, she screamed at him. The cyclist blinked. What? This road is illegal. This man, she pointed dramatically at my barn, has orchestrated a hostile takeover of our community. The cyclist shrugged and pedaled off, probably assuming she was part of some local street performance art gone wrong. She turned to me next, locking onto my presence like a hawk spotting a threat. You, she hissed. You think people support you? They don't. They pity you. You're an outsider. You don't belong. I leaned casually against the fence post. Well, I said, I belong enough for the county to approve my road. That was corruption. That was paperwork. You're mocking me. No, I replied. I'm tired. And I was tired. Tired of her noise, her theatrics, her weaponized indignation. Tired of having to defend my right to simply live on land I bought with my own money, maintained with my own hands, and cherished with an honesty she never understood. But I also knew this phase would burn out eventually. People like her run on emotional fuel, and once the tank empties, they sputter. For a brief moment, I thought we had finally reached the end. But then came the petition. Not a legal petition she'd burned that bridge long ago, but a handwritten one she circulated around her neighborhood. A petition demanding that I pay a community restoration fee for the emotional damage caused by the road and her removal from the HOA. The audacity was almost impressive. One evening, I found her standing by the road, holding the petition like a sacred scroll. Sign it, she demanded. I stared at her. You want me to sign a document that demands I pay for the consequences of your own actions? It's accountability. It's delusion. You owe us, she shouted, voice cracking. For what? For everything. And there it was, the raw, unfiltered truth of her worldview. Everything was owed to her. Everything belonged to her. Every decision that displeased her was a personal attack. I didn't engage further. I simply walked away. She chased after me for several steps, but eventually gave up, muttering to herself. A few nights later, around 10 p.m., motion lights flicked on near the barn. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The wind had picked up, pushing clouds across the moon like drifting shadows. I scanned the area. Nothing seemed out of place. Then I saw it. A wooden board leaning against the fence, painted with shaky letters dripping unevenly down the grain. You brought this on yourself, I exhaled, not with fear, but exasperation. She wasn't dangerous, just relentless. A storm that wouldn't end. I photographed the board, logged it with the sheriff's office, and moved on. The next morning, I found out where the board came from. One of the neighbors from her development, an older man named Jace, drove down to my farm, parking by the new road. He waved politely. Morning, he said. I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I wanted to apologize. On behalf of, well, the neighborhood. I raised a brow. For what? For her, he said simply. I blinked. You don't owe me an apology. No, he said, scratching his beard. But someone should say it out loud. He explained that the HOA had been unraveling ever since her removal. People were turning on each other, digging up grudges, pointing fingers. Her presence had been irritating, yes, but also strangely stabilizing, like a lightning rod that kept all the other charges in place. Without her, everyone's grievances scattered. She stirred the pot, he said. But the truth is, She wasn't the only one spoiling the stew. He glanced toward her house, visible in the distance like a fortress of self-righteousness. She left that board on your fence last night, he added. I figured. She told the neighborhood you threatened her. Of course she did. He shook his head. I just want you to know not everyone here thinks you're the villain she paints you as. It was a simple gesture, but it softened something in me. Living out here wasn't supposed to be a battleground. It wasn't supposed to be a performance of stubbornness and boundaries and accusations. It was supposed to be a life. Jace left after a few minutes. But the peace didn't last long. Later that week, I found her standing in front of her open garage, organizing dozens of cardboard boxes. She spotted me walking along the new road and marched toward me, fire burning in her stride. I hope you're happy, she spat. Not particularly. You've ruined everything. I enforce my boundaries. You destroyed my standing in the community. You destroyed it yourself. You think I'm the villain, she said, voice trembling. I think you're someone who can't accept no. She flinched as if I'd struck her. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then, in a softer voice, the kind that felt raw despite the sharp edges, she said, You don't understand what this place means to me. I hesitated, not because I felt any sympathy for her behavior, but because for the first time since I met her, she didn't look righteous. She looked lost. What does it mean to you? I asked. She blinked rapidly, then looked away. It's the one place where I mattered. I said nothing, because what could I say to that? People who feel powerless sometimes cling to the wrong things. Control, rules, authority they invent for themselves. She swallowed hard. My life was different before I moved here. Chaotic, disrespectful. People walked over me all the time. And so you decided to walk over others? I asked gently. I took what I deserved, she whispered. Deserved, I repeated. Or needed. She stiffened. Don't analyze me. I'm not. I'm asking. Her eyes flickered. Then the walls slammed up again. She straightened, heat rising back into her voice like steel cooling into shape. You'll regret what you've done, she said. And she walked away. Her vulnerability had been fleeting, gone as soon as it appeared. But it lingered in my mind, bothering me. Not as pity, not as guilt, but as clarity. This wasn't just about a gate, or a road, or an HOA. It was about a woman who built her entire identity around a fragile sense of control, and when that control slipped, she lashed out. But knowing that didn't make her any easier to deal with. A week later, the final blow fell not from me, not from the HOA, but from the county itself. They fined her, not for the road, not for the drama, but for an unrelated violation that had gone unnoticed for years, an unpermitted extension behind her house. A violation she would have gotten away with if she hadn't drawn so much attention to herself. The county didn't care about her theatrics. They cared about building codes. The fine was steep. The mandatory correction was even steeper. When she received the notice, her scream echoed across the entire neighborhood. And that was when her downfall stopped being symbolic and became real. I didn't celebrate. There was no joy in someone unraveling, even someone who made my life hell for months. But there was truth. And truth doesn't need celebration. It just needs acknowledgement. The road remained. The gate was rebuilt. The land grew quieter. And she began to fade from the center of the storm she created. But storms don't end cleanly. Not with someone like her. And the darkest part of this story, the part one didn't expect, was still coming. In the days after her fine arrived, the neighborhood buzzed with a quiet tension. Not the loud, performative tension she thrived on, but something heavier and exhausted sort of dread, like everyone was waiting for the next explosion and hoping desperately that it wouldn't happen. But with her, explosions were inevitable. I kept to myself, focusing on the farm. Summer was creeping in, turning the grassland a warm gold that rippled like silk under the wind. For the first time since buying the place, I felt something close to peace. The new road worked beautifully. Delivery trucks no longer had to hunch down the old narrow path. Visitors followed clear signage. And the view from my porch finally matched the tranquility I had dreamed about years earlier. But quiet never stays quiet for long when someone is determined not to let it. One late afternoon, while repairing irrigation lines near the barn, I heard a vehicle pulling up. I turned, expecting a neighbor or maybe another official with paperwork for something mundane. Instead, it was her, driving slowly, carefully, as if rehearsing the entrance to a final confrontation. Her car rolled to a stop at the new turnout by the barn. She stepped out, her posture less rigid than before, her expression oddly blank. Not furious, not triumphant, just a strained calm. A calm that worried me more than her rage ever did. She walked toward me, her steps uneven. "We need to talk," she said. I set the wrench down, but didn't move closer. "I'm listening." For a few seconds, she only stared at the ground. When she finally looked up, her eyes were tired, red, and rimmed, not from anger, but from something that looked like defeat. "The county fine," she began. "It's more than I can pay." I waited. "And the HOA won't help. They said I caused enough trouble, that I dragged them into too many fights." I nodded slightly, not unkindly. She exhaled sharply. "You think this is funny? You think I deserve this?" "I don't think it's funny," I said quietly. "But I do think your actions led here." "That's not fair," she snapped, voice tightening. "I was protecting my community. You were enforcing your will." She flinched at the word. Then she laughed, a cold, brittle sound that crackled like thin ice. "You know, I thought if I stood firm, if I fought hard enough, people would see I was right, that they'd respect me. But they turn on me the moment things got messy. People don't follow someone who's always fighting," I said. "They follow someone who listens." She shook her head. "No, you don't understand. This place, it gave me purpose. And then you came and—" She stopped. Her jaw clenched. "You took it away." I let the silence sit. The wind carried the scent of dust and the faint rattle of dry grass. "I didn't take anything," I said. "I protected my property. The law protected the road. You undermined yourself." She wiped at her face abruptly, frustrated by her own emotion. "I'm leaving," she said. That caught me by surprise. "Leaving the neighborhood?" "Leaving everything," she whispered. "Selling the house. Selling the furniture. I can't stay here." The words hung in the air, heavy and strange. For all her chaos, she had been a constant presence in the landscape, loud, persistent, impossible to ignore. The idea of her absence felt unreal. She took a small folded paper from her pocket and extended it toward me. "This is the last thing I'll say. Written down. So you don't twist it." I hesitated, then took it. It wasn't a threat, or a manifesto, or a complaint. It was a letter. A real one. Handwritten, the ink uneven from rushed strokes and trembling fingers. I skimmed it. It wasn't an apology, but it was something close. A confession of fear, of loneliness, of the desperation to matter, of losing control of a life that had once spiraled beyond her grasp. There were parts where she tried to justify herself, parts where she blamed circumstance, not choices. But between the lines was a truth I had sensed but never heard. She had built her identity on being the guardian of something fragile. And when that illusion cracked, she didn't know how to stand on her own. I folded the letter. "Thank you for giving me this," I said. She looked away. "I didn't do it for you." "I know." She stepped back toward her car. "I won't bother you again," she said, voice thin. "The house should be on the market by next week. And after that," she shrugged, "maybe somewhere people don't think I'm the villain." I didn't say it, but the thought hovered in my mind. She wasn't a villain. She was her own worst enemy. As she drove away, I watched the taillights disappear over the hill. A strange emptiness settled in the pit of my stomach. Not sorrow, not relief. Something more complicated. A quiet acknowledgement that battles leave scars even when you win. For 2 weeks, her house sat mostly quiet. A few real estate agents came and went. Movers carried out boxes. Neighbors whispered. The space she once dominated with her voice and opinions slowly grew still, like the echo of a storm finally fading. Then one early morning, just as the sun was bleeding coral light across the horizon, I saw her car roll out of the neighborhood for the last time. She didn't stop. She didn't wave. She didn't look back. And that was how the saga of HOA Karen finally ended, not with an outburst, not with a confrontation, but with her silence. And yet, the story wasn't finished. Not for me. Because what happened next, the part that truly closed this chapter, came months later. Summer turned to fall. Leaves crisped into burnt orange fireballs that spun across the fields. The farm was thriving. The new road had become a part of the community's rhythm, accepted the way people eventually accept all inevitable things. One chilly morning, a letter arrived, postmarked from another state. No return address. I didn't need one to know who sent it. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Short, plain, direct, not dramatic, not accusatory, not combative. Just this: "I understand now. I lost myself trying to control everything around me. It wasn't your fault. I hope your land brings you peace. I'm trying to find mine too. No signature, but it didn't need one. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, not as a trophy, not as evidence, but as a reminder that people are complicated, messy, sometimes destructive, and sometimes capable of growth. Even her. Later that evening, I walked the length of the new road, letting the cool wind press against my jacket. The asphalt gleamed softly under the setting sun. Fences lined the path like quiet markers of shape and structure. My Gatry built sturdier than ever stood strong at the entrance to the farm. For the first time since moving here, everything felt settled. Not because she was gone, not because I had won, but because the land had finally become what it was meant to be, a place of clarity, a place of boundaries, a place where things grew crops, trees, futures without someone trying to choke the roots. As I reached the crest of the hill overlooking the fields, I breathed deeply, letting the crisp autumn air anchor me. The road had changed more than the landscape. It had changed the story. It had started as a shield, a solution, a countermeasure. But it became something bigger, a statement that peace can be defended, that boundaries matter, that standing firm doesn't mean becoming cruel, and that sometimes the only way to disarm chaos is to refuse to be pulled into its orbit. The sun dipped fully behind the ridge, spilling the last streaks of gold across the sky. My land glowed. My home stood steady. The world felt balanced. And somewhere, far from here, the woman once known as H.O.A. Karen was learning to rebuild her own life without battling mine. That was enough. More than enough. Because some stories end with victory. Some end with defeat. But the best ones end with understanding. And this one, this long, twisting, maddening story ended exactly where it needed to, with peace. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the latest videos.